and let us all do we can to build a better future.
Senator Rand Paul. I never thought I'd say this in my life, but Senator Rand Paul has seemed to have outlefted AOC and the Squad, Bernie Sanders, and so many other people. Now, again, he's part of the Republican Party, so don't really expect much from any of these lawmakers, but when a broken clock is right, I'm going to give it credit where it's due. Now, he brings up some very important points, especially about the fact that this $40 billion is a huge waste of money and it could be used for other things as well. So I want to pull up this video here. It's about 5 minutes long, but I think Senator Rand Paul is making some very strong arguments in regards to the fact that this ridiculous economic package that's being sent to Ukraine for this proxy war that the U.S. is using Ukraine to fight Russia with, Rand Paul's making a lot of good points that it's hard to argue with. So let's play it.
The right to object. My oath of office is to the U.S. Constitution, not to any foreign nation. And no matter how sympathetic the cause, my oath of office is to the national security of the United States of America. We cannot save Ukraine by dooming the U.S. economy. In March, inflation hit a 40-year high. Gasoline alone is up 48%, and energy prices are up 32% over the last year. Food prices have increased by nearly 9%. Used vehicle prices are up 35% for the year, and new vehicle prices have increased 12% or more. Yes, inflation doesn't just come out of nowhere. It comes from deficit spending. The United States spent nearly $5 trillion on COVID-19 bailouts, leading to one of the highest and most sustained levels of inflation in U.S. history. Americans are feeling the pain, and Congress seems intent only on adding to that pain by shoveling more money out the door as fast as they can. This bill under consideration would spend $40 billion. This is the second spending bill for Ukraine in 2 months, and this bill is 3 times larger than the first. Our military aid to Ukraine is nothing new, though. Since 2014, the United States has provided more than $6 billion in security assistance to Ukraine, in addition to the $14 billion Congress authorized just a month ago. If this bill passes, the U.S. will have authorized roughly $60 billion in total spending for Ukraine. For those who say this is not enough, for those of you in this chamber who say that our military spending is never enough, let's put $60 billion into perspective. According to Elias Youssef, a security assistant at the Stimson Center, Kiev would become the largest yearly recipient of U.S. military aid of the past 2 decades. Except for the top 5 countries, $60 billion is more than every other country in the world spends on their entire military expenditures. If this gift to Ukraine passes, our total aid to Ukraine will almost equal the entire military budget of Russia. And it's not as if we have that money lying around. We will have to borrow that money from China to send it to Ukraine. The cost of this package we are voting on today is more than the U.S. spent during the first year.
Pause right here. Now, at least everything that was being brought up by Senator Rand Paul, there's a lot of truth to it. This inflation has been getting progressively worse. And plus, the United States owes so much money already to China. And think about how this will severely impact our treasury. Now, I don't know what it's going to take for everyone to sit down at the table and talk out this conflict peaceably, maybe use the art of diplomacy. But the United States, especially under the Biden-Harris administration, are dead set in giving more money for this proxy war. Now, Senator Rand Paul, by the time this video is clipped, especially for our audiences on our YouTube channel, when this video does come out, now who knows if Senator Rand Paul will continue, again, using his vote to withhold his vote for this $40 billion package. Here's hoping that he follows through with it. Because what I find enraging is that we have money for this war, but we don't have money for our public schools. We have money for this war, and we don't have money for UBI. We have money for this war, and we can't invest into our infrastructure. We have money for this war, and we can't do anything about student debt or medical debt. No affordable education. Somehow we have the money, all these ridiculous regime change wars. but we don't have money to take care of our people. It's not only Heartland's media that's calling this out. There's a lot of independent media networks that are calling this out, but yet, what do you hear from CNN or MSNBC or Fox News? Well, you see them wagging their finger, telling us, oh, we got to stop Russia. We got to be ready to fight Russia. But, you know, Russia does have its own arsenal of nuclear weapons. They have those weapons of mass destruction. And it seems that this administration is they're very reckless right now. They want to keep on poking the bear, seeing how far they can get before they trigger something from happening. But when these mushroom clouds in the sky start blowing up and cities are vaporized, will there be anyone left to ask the question, was it worth it? This has to stop. And shame on our lawmakers for doing this, especially as Americans right now are struggling with inflation. It's going to severely impact our country, and we cannot afford this. You know, we hear from these lawmakers saying, oh, we can't afford to do free college or Medicare for all. We can't do it. How are you going to pay for it? Here's what I want to ask these lawmakers. This $40 billion you're going to give to Ukraine, how are we going to pay for it? Let's play the rest of the video.
Of the U.S. conflict in Afghanistan. Congress authorized force, and the president sent troops into the conflict. The same cannot be said of Ukraine. This proposal towers over domestic priorities as well. The massive package of $60 billion to Ukraine dwarfs the $6 million spent on cancer research annually. $60 billion is more than the amount the government collects in gas taxes each year to build roads and bridges. The $60 billion to Ukraine could fund substantial portions or entire large cabinet departments. The $60 billion nearly equals the entire State Department budget. The $60 billion exceeds the budget for the Department of Homeland Security and for the Department of Energy. And Congress just wants to keep on spending and spending. Our allies and partners have sent aid to Ukraine. Some of them even broke long-standing traditions by sending military assistance. Germany, Poland, the United Kingdom, and others are stepping up to defend Ukraine like never before. In other words, it's not all about us. It isn't that we always have to be the Uncle Sam, the policeman that saves the world, particularly when it's on borrowed money. Yet the United States accounted for nearly half of what's been spent so far. With a $30 trillion debt, America can't afford to be the world's policeman. The U.S. is trying to recover from the $1.6 trillion we spent on wars in the Middle East, not to mention the $5 trillion borrowed for COVID. We should not forget that the Soviet Union collapsed in large part, not because it was defeated militarily, but because it ran out of money. In an attempt to save Ukraine, will we doom the United States to such a future? In the past 2 years, the U.S. has borrowed more money than at any time in our history. We are already experiencing the greatest rate of inflation in over 4 decades. The assault on monetary discipline is untenable, and it cannot go on forever. Unless we put an end to the fiscal insanity, a day of reckoning awaits us. Congress should evaluate the cost of continuing down this path. The biggest threat to the United States today is debt and inflation and the destruction of the dollar. We cannot save Ukraine by killing our economic strength. So I act to modify the bill to allow for a special inspector general. This would be the inspector general that's been overseeing the waste in Afghanistan and has done a great job. So therefore, I ask the senator to modify his request so that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of Calendar 368 H.R. 7691. Furthermore, that the Paul Amendment that has to be considered and agreed to, the bill as amended be considered read a third time, and the Senate vote on passage of the bill as amended with a 60 affirmative vote threshold for passage.
Again, it's hard for me to say this, but I am shocked I'm agreeing with Senator Rand Paul. Bernie Sanders, where was his passion when it came time to, again, as Roger Meadows had pointed out, stopping the CARES Act, for example, which was the largest transfer of wealth to the top 1%. I want to pull up this next video here. It's again Senator Rand Paul talking about this ridiculous $40 billion. Let's play it.
It does not follow that there's no explanation for the invasion. John Mearsheimer writes that the trouble over Ukraine actually started at NATO's Bucharest summit in 2008 when George W. Bush administration pushed the alliance to announce that Ukraine and Georgia will become members. Even with this 2008 announcement, though, most analysts acknowledge that it was unlikely that either country would ever be admitted to NATO because of opposition from France and Germany. Nevertheless, the U.S., including the Biden administration, insisted on beating the drums to admit Ukraine to NATO. Just last fall, you signed the U.S.-Ukraine Charter on Strategic Partnership, which renewed a commitment to the 2008 Bucharest Declaration supporting Ukrainian admission to NATO. Knowing full well that Ukraine was unlikely to ever join NATO since it had already been 14 years since they said they were going to become members, why was it so important last fall, before this invasion, to continue agitating for Ukraine's admission to NATO?
Thank you, Senator. Not a question of agitating for Ukraine's admission. It's a question of standing up for the basic principle that we strongly adhere to, that there should be and will be an open-door policy when it comes to NATO membership. These are sovereign decisions for European countries to make, and of course a decision for the NATO alliance to make in terms of making sure that a country that wishes to join actually adds value to NATO. But this goes to the heart of the international system and the international order, and part of that is a basic principle that one country can't dictate to another the choices it makes about with whom it allies. Its foreign policies, its decision or not to try to engage with the European Union, with NATO. The other thing
and yet, as we speak and we see the destruction in Ukraine, we also hear pronouncements from President Zelensky saying, well, you know what, maybe we might consider neutrality as a possibility. There could have been voices before this invasion, instead of agitating for something that we knew our adversary absolutely hated and said was a red line as recently as last September, before you signed the agreement, once again agitating for NATO. Russia said that it was a red.
Again, this conflict could have been avoided. This conflict didn't need to happen. Now, of course, as Rand Paul talking about, again, why we again have to avoid this war and, more importantly, reconsider this $40 billion. There's been a lot of media outlets that have been talking down, or either that, trying to shame him for how he's made this vote. So I want to read a few short excerpts from this article from The Guardian. The top Democratic and Republicans in the U.S. Senate joined forces in a rare moment of unity on Thursday in an attempt to pass $40 billion in aid for Ukraine, only to be stymied by a single Republican lawmaker, the Kentucky Libertarian Rand Paul. Faced with the prospect of an extended delay for the package that passed the House of Representatives on Tuesday, the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, and his Republican counterpart, Mitch McConnell, sought to move forward on the aid package, only to be blocked by Paul, a fiscal hawk, who objects to the amount of spending proposed. The stalemate delayed passage for the measure into next week. The Senate has scheduled an initial procedural vote on the bill for late Monday afternoon. It was unclear whether that vote would then speed passage of the Ukraine aid. Alternatively, passage could come around the middle of next week if any senator wants to force a series of legislative steps before a final vote. As the Ukraine aid bill became caught in the Senate's procedural gears, Schumer pleaded for fast action. The package is ready to go. The vast majority of senators on both sides of the aisle want it. He added, if Senator Paul persists in his reckless demands, all he will accomplish is to single-handedly delay desperately needed Ukrainian aid. But Paul was not moved. The delay into next week could cause problems for Western countries trying to bolster Ukraine in its fight against Russia. The Biden administration has said that by the 19th of May, it expects to run out of available funds to draw on under an authority that allows the president to authorize the transfer of weapons without congressional approval in response to an emergency. Paul is demanding that the legislation be altered to require an inspector general to oversee spending on Ukraine. Without his agreement, the Senate must follow a lengthy process stipulated by the chamber's arcane rules. McConnell, Paul's fellow senator from Kentucky, weighed in, saying Ukraine is not asking us to fight this war. They're only asking for the resources they need to defend themselves against this deranged invasion, and they need this help right now. The House passed the Ukrainian spending bill by 368 to 57, with only Republicans voting against it. Joe Biden has asked Congress to approve an additional $33 billion in aid for Ukraine, but lawmakers decided to increase the military and humanitarian funding. So let's stop right here for a second. We have the resources for this war. Now, I think Senator Rand Paul is, I think he's being reasonable at this point. He's being reasonable in regards to calling out the fact that, again, this is reckless spending. Right now, it's $40 billion. What's stopping the Senate and House from making it $50 billion, $60 billion, $80 billion, $100 billion? How much more money is going to be needed? You want to stop this conflict? The United States, NATO, the UN, Russia have got to sit down at a table and talk this thing out. This conflict is getting ridiculous, and there's a very good chance it could further escalate to where everything could be destroyed. And I don't think any one of us want to see that happen. But what all of us should be questioning right now is, our lawmakers are quickly moving forward to provide funds for the military-industrial complex. When it comes time for war and continuing to push it forward, our lawmakers are more than happy to be the first ones to jump to the attention of the military-industrial complex. This has got to stop. This needs to stop. What about money for the American people? This inflation is evidence enough. Americans are struggling right now. Even Americans working 2 or 3 jobs right now, it's still not enough. Where are our progressive fighters? Where is the squad? Where is Bernie Sanders? Where are all these lawmakers at? Where are they at? How come they're not the ones asking questions? How come they're not the ones bringing up the fact that we have $40 billion for this war, but we don't have money to take care of our people? This has got to stop. We'll see how the rest of this plays out for next week. But so far, at least somebody is asking questions of, why are we doing this? Why are we continuing to let this conflict further escalate out of control?